Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm all right. A little bit under the weather, but getting there.
I don't spend the bins with the weather we've had today. Has been bloody awful.
The weather has been.
Yeah, it's been raining.
Not in Glasgow, man. 3 degrees and sunny. Beautiful outside.
Well, just as well I got my hat on, eh?
Just as well. I know I don't think the dog's going to be making an appearance, unfortunately. She's
Oh no, what's wrong
snuggled
with
up in
Harper?
bed. I think she's just asleep on the bed because it's warm and cozy. You know?
Makes sense, figures. I think I'd probably be doing the same if it wasn't for the fact that I'd committed to sitting on LinkedIn Live chatting to you about brand.
Yeah, I'd be doing the same if I hadn't committed to this either. So thanks for ruining my Thursday afternoon. Having it
Amazing.
out. Did you see the new System 1 research? It literally just came out yesterday, I think, or today, talking about branding consistency.
Yes, yeah, that's really interesting stuff. So that's basically you build a brand over time by staying consistent with the advertising, right?
Mm-hmm. Which builds on older stuff that they did, where they talked about how good ads, emphasis on good, wear in, not out. So they get more effective the longer that you run them, which I think is really interesting. But because I'm a cynical old, can you swear on LinkedIn Live? That's going to be a problem.
Yeah, of course you can.
Because I'm a cynical old bastard, I was kind of like, find me a client or an employer or a CEO or someone who will let you run the same ad every day for 24 years. Like that, is it Fluridex?
Yeah,
The one
yeah,
that's been
yeah.
running on the tube? Yeah. I've never worked for a company or seen a company that would let someone run the same ad for that long.
Well, it's interesting, but first, hi Gemma, hi Mark. So one of the interesting things about the Australian Tourist Board ad, which was obviously really famous last year, is that they put all of their creative budget in year one to develop a campaign that would then run for at least 3 years.
Mhm.
Which is a super smart use of budget because then you're letting the ad kind of do its job, and it's a bloody good ad. I mean, it's been well written, it's been well produced, and it's going to run for at least 3 years. So you're going to get that kind of repetition, you're going to get that consistency, and kind of the CMO there is brilliant. I saw it. I think it was Festival of Marketing last year. Just so smart, brilliant.
Mm. Which is interesting, right? Because sometimes I feel like when you have these bits of, and I love the guys at System One, this is no shade to them at all. When you have this kind of research, they're sort of validating what we all know, right? Or they're
Yeah,
validating what you see big brands doing. Like Coca-Cola's never changed their logo, but find me an SME that doesn't change their logo every 6 months. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the time those like smaller companies will look at bigger brands and say, well, we can't be like Coke, we don't have the budget or we don't have the brand equity. I think part of the reason that you'll never have the budget, but part of the reason you don't have the brand equity is because like the research says you're just not consistent enough.
yeah, 100%, 100%. It's one of those weird things where, and I'm going to be making this mistake next week at a talk where, I showed Coke as an example of something. Yeah, you can always look at that and go, yeah, but it's Coca-Cola. But as you say, they've been so consistent with not just their logo, but so many of their assets. And,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I'll be showing next week. And yeah, as Mark says, Specsavers have gone non-stop with the same. Specsavers have been absolutely tremendous with the, kind of should have gone to Specsavers campaign, and they've turned it into so many funny things. It's brilliant.
And it's interesting too because it's not even that bold.
No,
Like both
no, it's not.
Coca-Cola and Specsavers, they're not like bold brands. They're not like in-your-face brands, but they just double down on that consistency in a way that no one else, I think, ever does.
Well, the interesting thing about Specsavers as well is that they don't use agencies. They've got an in-house
It's a good
team out
choice.
in, yeah, they got an in-house team. Where are they? Are they Guernsey or Jersey? They're in one of the island. They're on one of the islands, and it's all run from the CMO down. So it's. I think one of the issues that we have with consistency is the model that the agencies now have. I think the agency model's been fucked for a few years now, where we allowed clients to separate out media from creative, and the fact is that the best spend of budget isn't to keep repeating creative. But when you've got creative agencies now incentivized to sell in new creative because they're not getting a cut of the media, it creates a really bad landscape. and it's tough. It's a tough one to manage. But if you've got an in-house team and you're the CMO, you can make that call and you can stick to it. I think that's one of the big differences there.
I think you're so right about the agency model too. I think I've talked about this before on podcasts and things, but it's like exactly as you say, agencies are incentivized to keep serving clients new versions of creative or new versions of this or new versions of that. And I think that like it's hard because on the client side, and I've come from client side before, sort of doing this, and it's like a lot of the time the client is in the agency's hands and they have to trust them, and they think about things like Mad Men and advertising and all of that sort of stuff. But the agency can so easily lead the client astray with, oh, this Facebook ad that we've run for 3 days hasn't worked. You need to pay us another $1,000 for, more Facebook creative. And then we need 10 more grand to put some more money behind it. It's like we haven't actually given it time to work. And also it might be shit, but
Right. Yeah. So Mark's coming with an interesting point. Mark Stone says TBWA Australia won the account a few years ago for Specsavers, and they did the recent Melbourne Sydney Airport ad, which is interesting. I don't know if that's transferred over here, but again, I think there is a place for agencies, absolutely, as kind of Austin has said down there as well. Would you advise the use of agencies or in-house? There is a risk with using in-house, and we saw this a couple of years ago with Pepsi, where they just didn't have the diversity of external thought, and they produced an ad which basically showed one of the Kenner girls stopping the race riots by giving a policeman a can of Pepsi, and that just wouldn't have flown in any half-decent agency. I think a bit of external view is useful. I think that the reality is that the agency model is broken. That doesn't necessarily mean that agencies are. You're probably likely to get better creative work from agencies, but the model has changed to such an extent that a lot of agencies are having to bring in more clients than they would have done in the past. So you can't exist on 3 or 4 accounts that you might have been able to do in the golden age. A kind of a tobacco account, an aircraft account, and a car account, and something else. You need to kind of build up the churn, and I think that's kind of where we got to it. But I think someone in-house needs to be looking at the outcomes, the business outcomes, and using agencies to their best benefit.
So how would you, as someone that's worked in-house companies like Lego and other such a riffraff, what do you think like CEOs should be looking for when they're looking for marketing people that can wrangle agencies and have enough nous to know when to push back on what an agency says to do?
That's a good question, because actually one of the things that I've talked to people about in the past, just kind of peers and people in and around the industry, is the perspective you get when you've been both sides, and it's not as usual as it should be. So as a client, I know how to manage agencies, and as an agency, I know how to support clients. And I think there is a big misunderstanding between the two. So kind of agencies are sometimes like overexcitable dogs, and no, go right, great idea, come on, let's go for a run, great idea, let's do it now. And client side, you're sitting there kind of going, right, okay, well, I've got Cyber Monday, Black Friday coming up, then I've got Christmas, I need to plan for next year, we haven't got this on shelf, I'm going to need to persuade X person to do this. It's a completely different understanding. So I think what in-house marketers need to do is know how to get the best out of their agencies, but always to be looking to the bottom line. It's always about outcomes, and the more agencies understand that, I think the better it will be for agencies. But it's kind of, it is a bit of a different thing.
You just reminded me. So I was reading Mark's message about Sips and Bites. If that's the name of an agency, that's awesome, and I wish that I'd been that clever. And so initially in my career, I was always in-house, and then tried to shift to agency, and I couldn't even get a foot in the door with agency with interviews or anything with my resume, because they were like, well, you don't have agency experience. And I was like, no, I've got client-side experience. And they were like, yeah, but you don't know what it's like to work in an agency. And that was really interesting, because it was like, well, if you're only hiring people that have only ever worked in agencies, how do you know what clients want and what clients need and how clients feel? Like, where's that sort of external opinion? But I think that's something that I've come up against a lot And it's funny though, because now with Sober, that's part of what makes us great and what makes us so good is we can say, well, we've been on both sides of the coin. But I think if I were to sack this off and try and get an agency job, they would say, sorry, son, but you've never worked for an agency.
Who do you think is doing that? Is it the decision makers or is it external recruiters?
That's a good question. I think it's decision makers, at least in my experience, it's decision makers. Okay. And I think that's because like agencies like to think of themselves as these sort of unique, fast-paced environments where, you know, and I think it's also true that like if you work in-house and then go to agency, you know, your stomach drops when you see how much less you're going to get paid. But you know, they like to think of themselves as being a sort of unique, dynamic, interesting environment that's never existed before. And it's just not true.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think from my experience, my last client-side role was at the Lego Group, and they specifically wanted me in because I was an outsider, because I came from agency world, and maybe I lucked out because I'd had the hiring manager as a client in the past, so he knew what I was capable of. But you know, that was very much part of it. And my last agency role at Gasp, I think part of the draw there for them was that I'd had client-side experience. And you know, I think I've seen some of their recent hires as well have been client side, specifically because they understand the benefit of knowing what matters to clients. Because it's, as I said, it's not what people that are kind of just fully involved in agency side thinks. And yeah, I see such a value in me having a bit of experience both sides.
I'm just giggling at Mel's comment. Yeah,
always
there's nothing more disruptive
comments.
than a ping pong table.
Absolutely. Well, I actually table football and ping pong. Oh, disruptive. That really is. That's really, you know, I remember once an agency I worked with when I first started out as a freelancer, they had scooters in the office so people would scoot from one place to another. That was fucking disruptive. I can't believe I managed to get out of there alive.
Why?
Because .com era, I think.
Oh yeah, showing your age there, but yeah,
absolutely.
Made it big in the .com era with the scooters. I remember at an office job I worked at, we had foam fingers for a while, and we spent so long smacking each other in the head with them that they were taken off us before the day was out.
I went to an event recently and met someone that I've known online for years but hadn't met before, Jamie Klingler. He's probably not on the call here, but whatever her business was doing, they had foam fingers, and I was gutted that I forgot to pick one up before I left. That's just an insight to what matters to me.
You should get bins that are foam fingers.
Bins aren't fingers, mate. I think you're confused.
Foam
anyway, going
bins.
back to going back briefly to that Specsavers thing. So Matt Webster kind of he asked earlier about, you know, what do we think about brands who end up entering the everyday language, like that saying with Specsavers, or you know, you Hoover something, you Google something. How valuable or invaluable is that, or how valuable or not valuable, I should say, is that? What do you think?
Ask Tupperware, I think. It almost depends, doesn't it? Which is such a shit answer to give when someone asks you a question. It's like, it depends. But in the extreme side, in the extreme side of things, I think, you know, Tupperware are shutting down or have shut down or something, gone into liquidation, something like that. And, you know, they entered the vernacular, everyday language. You just sort of talked about your Tupperware. But then on the other side, though, you've got things like aspirin. You know, in the US and stuff. I don't think no one, actually, I've got a packet here. No one walks around saying, oh, I need to get some Tesco Health ibuprofen. You know, so I think it's good in terms of like brand salience, but I think it's then, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but it's what you do with that and 100%. How you keep that going. I mean, if you were Tupperware, right, how do you, I don't want to say innovate because it's like a wanker, but how do you innovate on plastic containers? Like, how do you keep that brand momentum going when you're in the vernacular?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, if you've got yourself, however, into that position of being part of vernacular, you've got to maintain it. And I think what we've seen is a number of brands that, for whatever reason, haven't. Maybe they've just kind of thought, hey, we've made it. But you know, Tupperware, Sellotape, even Hoover. When was the last time you brought Sellotape branded Sellotape, or a Hoover branded Hoover, or Tupperware branded Tupperware? You don't. You go in and you pick up another thing and you just think of it as that. So yeah, it can get to the point where it has no value whatsoever. I think I agree with that. Thanks, Ben. So the term agency land world makes me think of a once grand theme park, which is now crumbling and generally seen as an unsafe place to take children through to the drunks who roam its walkways. Fair. As a marketing outsider, how close am I to describing actual agency land?
I think agency land was fun. Like, what was it? 10 years ago, but now they're all broke and panicking.
Yeah. Yes. So agency land. I mean, there's a lot of people kind of my generation and probably younger who look back at the good old days where we were constantly smashed. Nobody worked Friday afternoons. Far too much drugs were taken. Well, unfortunately, we've still got kind of misogyny and sexism and kind of sexual assault, to be blunt, in the workplace. But now it is more a case of just work running on fear. I think you're right.
I've had one job like that. One job where we didn't work Friday afternoons. We got smashed at lunchtime in a decade-long career. Everything else has just been, oh shit, marketing has to have value now, which is nice, but also like it sucks that your generation got it, and millennials got the bottom of the barrel.
But then the other thing is, if you look, okay, let's take the millennials out of the equation. By the way, Gen X, because everyone always forgets that when you do a generational thing. But I think what we're seeing now is that there is a different work-life balance with Gen Z. And this confuses a lot of old geezers like me. Not me particularly, I get it. But when I speak to my peers, the fact that they don't see the joy in working 18-hour days for pizza. We used to fucking love that with this, with that, with the other, boom, boom, boom. And some of it was fun, some of it was exciting, but I think there is a healthier work-life balance now, agency side, than there used to be in most cases.
Yeah, I think you could also buy a house on an agency salary. So the pizza was like a nice sort of top up, right? But if you're Gen Z and you've seen your parents work themselves into the ground to, either pay for an extremely large mortgage or not even be able to buy a house, then I think your relationship with work is kind of like, why would I bother? Which I think is understandable.
I think so. But actually, I think also, probably the most important thing that I think I've seen or read recently is everyone wants to be me. And Mel has just said that on the chat. You're right, Mel. Everybody does want to be me or be with me. And, I know you find it a struggle to kind of keep control of yourself when we're in the same room. But thank you for saying that. It's important to speak the truth and to speak truth to power, right?
I want to say that Neil made an excellent point. Long-term brand building means nothing without continual innovation. That's why older brands are beginning to fail. I think some older brands are beginning to fail. I think some older brands are also going to be around for a long, long time. There are some that are too old and too big to fail. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about is like rebranding, because I think we see this a lot. And again, no shade to my colleagues that build brands and make their bread and butter off rebranding companies, but I think there's often an idea of like, and can I talk about the PayPal logo without sounding like one of those people? But I think we've seen the PayPal
logo.
Logos like right PayPal and stuff. I mean, it changed. Why did it change? Because I guess it looks a little bit cooler. Obviously they consulted a focus group, and the focus group said, sure, this looks a little bit cooler. I don't imagine that a company as big as PayPal has lost sales because its logo was in a slightly older font than it is now. I think brands are always, when things are tough, always think if we rebrand, then maybe we'll stand out in the market more. Maybe we will be more recognizable. I think in most cases, though, what they aren't considering is the amount of brand equity that they'll lose, especially if they're a brand that's more than 6 months old, say, and they've been actively marketing. It sounds insane to say it, but it would be like if Coca-Cola rebranded, and everyone would be like, well, who's this weird fizzy cola drink that no one wants? The value in Coke is its red and its font and its brand equity and all of that sort of stuff. It's not the actual taste of the actual drink, right? No. And so it's like, I think a lot of people rush into that sort of rebranding, and they shouldn't do. That's my position, is that most people should not rebrand most of the time. What do you think about that?
I'd love to disagree because it's probably more interesting. But
please do. Tell me I'm wrong.
I can't
disagree with me, baby.
I think, in all honesty, I think the least important thing about a brand is its logo. And normally when we see rebrands, what we see is a new visual identity. So if you take PayPal, I mean, I don't think they've massively lost the equity because it's quite close. But you know, sometimes, I mean, I've worked with clients in the past, and you know, we talk about distinctive assets and distinctiveness a lot, and we talk about kind of how in certain categories you have a sea of same. So you know, it might well be in a certain B2B category, everyone's logo is blue or green, and actually that's true of almost every B2B category, right? But speaking to a client and talking to a client about this last year who had a blue logo, their first response was, right, so we need to change logo. I'm like, no, you don't. The least important part of your brand is the logo. The most important part of your brand is the proposition, the value proposition, what it says, how it presents itself to market. That's more important than anything else. And in fact, even distinctive assets. And again, you know, the Coca-Cola thing, I'm going to be showing this next week. So, you know, if anyone's planning on coming up to Hull next week or is in Hull next week,
my condolences to anyone that's in Hull. But I'm excited to see Captain America's just entered the chat.
I do this thing where I go, right, okay, what is a brand? And I show a red square of a certain shade of red, which will be recognizable to a lot of people. And then I show it of a white ribbon across the middle of it. And then I show a couple of other things, I can't remember what. And then there's a sound effect of a kind of, and then we've got the kind of holidays are coming, holiday, and the always Coca-Cola. All of these things are distinctive brand assets, which have more value probably than the logo, certainly at least equal. You know, all of those things signal to you. And if you think about being, you're at a fridge or you're at a vending machine, you don't actually need to see the Coca-Cola logo lock up. You can see the color, or you can see the fact there's a little bit of a ribbon. You know, so for me, I'm a Diet Coke drinker because I'm diabetic. I see the silver can with a ribbon. I know that that's my drink. I don't need to stand there and work out what doesn't have sugar. That's the power of brand. That's the power of brand equity. And I think you're right. It's a mistake. It's often a mistake to lose it. So consider what you've got before considering changing it. And I think one of the other interesting things that came out of System 1, which you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation about consistency, is it kind of creatives and people in the brand. So marketers get bored of stuff far, far quicker than the general public do. In fact, they don't get bored of it. Only we do. So you need to take yourself out of your own mindset. And yeah, let's be blunt. Fucking hate this hat. Always hated this hat. But doesn't matter now. People see the hat and they know it's me. And there's no point me changing the hat because it works. It's a brand equity. It's a brand asset now. And I kind of learned that the hard way, but there it is.
So I would say the same, except I made a brand that I like and a mascot that I like. Although I wasn't expecting that my beard would turn into a distinctive asset. So that's something and that's not something I nominated. It's something people have said to me. But I guess when you have a sort of upside down head like I do, it's hard not to be in that situation. You said something just before that was quite interesting about that sort of brand equity stuff. And I've kind of lost the thread of it. This is a half-baked thought that's going to like sort of, oh yeah, I want to talk about the words. Let's talk about the words that are in brands, because I think words are important. How we use words are important. The words that we use are important. And also, I think that they're under threat in a really interesting way, because we now all have access to things like ChatGPT. We all now have access to, large language models and all of these kinds of things that can create massive amounts of content in seconds. I remember when I very first met Malcolm Auld. If you're not familiar with Malcolm, he's a good friend and mentor of mine, and he was the CEO of Ogilvy in Asia Pac. And I remember one of the first times I met him, he said, content marketing is the only type of marketing that starts with the word con. And that was super interesting, right? Yeah, he's good like that. Yeah. But, people talk about content. They think about content. They think about just these days get ChatGPT to just pour out as much as you can, fill the internet with dross. What's happened there, I think, is two things. Firstly, we've seen the massive devaluation in the power that words can have and the words should have, which I'll talk about in a sec. I think the second thing is that ChatGPT has kind of raised the noise level on the floor. So to now everyone can make as much noise as each other. We can all say the same things. And so the noise level has been lifted. And so I think it's harder for companies now to think about, what's going to go above that. But and this is where, you need to hire copywriters and that kind of thing. But I think I always try to stress with people that, that Lucky Strike slogan, it's toasted. Like all of these things that we, the Specsavers one, again, like all of these things that we take for granted now won't come up with by a machine. And I think people forget, firstly, they forget that. And then secondly, when it comes to the types of words that they use and the way that they use them, because everyone has a keyboard, everyone thinks they're a writer. I think the bit that's missing is the psychology aspect. People don't fully understand that, in order to make someone change their behavior or make a purchase from your company, you have to appeal to them emotionally, you have to appeal to them rationally. You have to be able to speak to them in a way that feels like you're speaking to them. And I know in the cybersecurity research you did, actually, you talked about this, where you talked about the amount of companies that use we versus you. And people often think that free is the most powerful word in the English language, but it's not, right? It's you, because people feel like they're being spoken to themselves. And there are a lot of content writers, content creators, copywriters, sort of whatever they sort of want to call themselves out there. And I think that's created a problem combined with ChatGPT, that people have forgotten the psychology. And advertising and marketing and proposition is as much about psychology as it is about the words on the page.
It's all about psychology. It's all about psychology. And so, as someone that's kind of found my way into this industry as a designer, and then a kind of generalist marketer, my heroes are copywriters. I think,
Thank you.
Copywriters are sometimes, I don't think they're celebrated enough, because ultimately I think words are more important than visuals, because they set a scene, they set the tone. And what I've seen with AI, you're right. I mean, there's the enshittification of the web, right? So everyone can now literally just diarrhea out a whole load of posts and content to whatever kind of cadence the tech bros are telling us what we should be doing. But it's just noise. It's white noise. And my view at the moment of AI, and this may change, we don't know where it's going to go, but right now AI is as good at creating mediocre content as mediocre content creators are. So if you're happy being mediocre, you can cut costs by not using a human and use AI. If you want to make a difference, you need to speak truth to people. You need to talk to them in a way that moves them. And that's not about making them cry, making them happy. This isn't about brand love, but this is about making someone feel enough that they're going to remember your brand positively, but more importantly, they're going to remember it. And I don't think you get that from a lot of the shite. So I was talking to someone yesterday about actually referencing back to that cyber report that we did. Kind of one of the most used words that we found when we did a kind of a scan of a whole bunch of cybersecurity business sites was the word solution. Solution means literally nothing. It's word soup. Nobody sells solutions. What are you selling? Are you selling widgets? Are you selling services? But with the guy I was speaking to yesterday, they're selling both things. So they haven't yet quite come to where they need to be. But that's something for us to work on. But it's interesting how you get this kind of word soup. And of course, as a large language model, what AI currently is set up to do is to produce the average of the internet. And if it finds solutions used everywhere, unless you tell it otherwise, I'm sure there's some great prompt engineers who knew that was going to be a thing, who can sort of tell it not to do the standard, but they're still not speaking to humans.
Mark's absolutely right, by the way, when he says content factories were a churn problem before Gen AI went mainstream. I applied for a job when I was younger, which was exactly one of those types of jobs. And it was like a content sweatshop. And you got paid sort of per word, and it was 50p per word, and you worked 12 hours a day, just writing bullshit about whatever. I think now it's almost been weaponized, right? And not weaponized in a fun way.
As we've seen with kind of technology going back probably forever, but certainly if we go back to kind of the beginning of the internet age, that what this technology has done is it's allowed people to move a lot faster and a lot cheaper. So you can have a brand online quite quickly. And so it's, you know, you could call it democratizing if you like. I really struggle with that word in this sense though. But what it is doing is it's giving a lot of tools to people that actually don't really know how to use them, or more importantly, they don't know how necessarily to get the best outcomes. And you see that a lot with when we see our LinkedIn thought leaders. And I ain't no LinkedIn thought leader. I'm a hat wearer, right? And yeah, Seb is obviously a non-hat wearer. He's beard wearer, but everything is formulaic, and it's the same formula for everyone, and they're just missing the point. Post 4 times. I remember kind of years ago when I was doing more stuff in social, someone kind of going, "Oh, what are the optimal times for posting?" Oh, it's like, well, you post here and here, and these are the times. And like, what? So you're all going to post at the same fucking time? Who do you think's got the time to sit there and read 10,000 parallel concurrent posts
that all say solutions?
Solutions that all say solutions, and we're innovative, probably.
Our innovative solutions. Innovative?
That's a very, very good Bruce Forsyth impression there. I like that.
It's nice to be in a supportive environment. Can we talk about TV?
Yeah, let's talk about TV.
I want to talk about TV because I saw recently that Prime are going to ramp up the amount of ads that they put on their lower tier subscription. And we know that Disney and HBO Max, I will not call it Max, also have ads on their sort of, you know, impoverished level subscriptions. He says tongue in cheek. The thing that I think is interesting about this is, I think, 2 things. Firstly, when Prime launched that ad-supported tier, they really struggled to get brands on board. That seems to have changed now because they're ramping up more ads. But I think, secondly, potentially the most interesting thing is when streaming came out, everyone talked about how linear TV was dead and linear TV no longer worked and it wasn't effective and all of those things. And we know that's bullshit, and there's plenty of research that shows that's bullshit and it's still effective. But seeing streaming services now turn to the model of linear TV to fund themselves, I mean, has been like a glorious but slightly infuriating thing to watch. I mean, the amount of Timberland ads I watched during my James Bond rewatch last week was diabolical. But what's interesting about them, I think, is they're almost giving, you know, if you watch like Taskmaster on Channel 4 and they have the sort of, or they used to have the Coors Light ads bookending each sides of the ad breaks. That was sort of slightly annoying, but I remember it, right? It's annoying as a consumer. I get it as a marketer. What I think is interesting about the streaming approach is now it seems that you can just buy the ad breaks for an entire section, right? So you could make someone watch 5 Coca-Cola ads in the space of their 2-hour, 40-minute movie. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting move. I also think, as a third point, and now, you know, we talk about digital marketers and digital marketing as if it's sort of like a special, like in and of its own thing. Is TV now digital? Should digital marketers now be able to book TV ads?
Yeah, interesting point. Because I mean, I think you can certainly make the case that YouTube, a digital platform, is TV. Yeah, YouTube is a TV channel, and it's been shown that of all the digital channels, YouTube or video, I should say, as a kind of format, can build brand in the same way that TV can. And it was always kind of said in the past that digital isn't for building brand, it's for activation. Well, it can, and they are different. And I think what we're seeing is we're kind of seeing almost a classic people going in, being disruptive with different models, and then realizing that the model wasn't broken in the first place in a lot of ways. And you know, because you go in, you get all excited about the thing, you get excited about the platform, the technology, you know, the whatever it is. And yeah, certainly in the early days of any new technology or any new channel, any new media channel, it's seen as a new and special thing. So being a digital marketing expert, it's just, unless you're, you know, I mean, you've got people now who, for me, are engineers. You know, kind of SEO is an engineering tool, PPC is an engineering tool. Yes, it's part of marketing. When I started out as a digital marketer, it was because no one in marketing knew how to make these channels work. You know, I'm going back to the mid-90s now. And so I was able to kind of find ways of delivering the same kind of benefits online as they were doing everywhere else. So it's a different thing. But that's gone now. Yeah, I'm just a marketer. I don't even consider myself a digital marketer anymore. But I think it is interesting because, I mean, we've seen the whole thing of moving away from cable to single kind of brand TV services and then back again. And I just think it's in flux because people are trying to find an easy way through. So some of these guys, I think, spent a shit ton of money, and that's a technical term, creating content, buying licenses, pumping stuff out, but not actually looking at profit. I think we seem to have forgotten what profit is. This kind of unicorn era where it's a drive for volume, not for success. It's mad, absolutely mad. I don't get it.
I think a lot of marketers have forgotten what profit is too. I think that's one interesting thing about the UK market particularly, is that there are loads of marketers. Marketers are a dime a dozen. Anyone can call themselves a marketer, but finding someone that understands, that marketing should be a profit center, not a loss center, and all these things that we've talked about, I think muddies the water as well, right? And it's really easy and I guess kind of lazy to sort of point at brands like Coca-Cola and be like, look, they're big and successful because they're consistent. And they are great as an example, but I think a lot of the smaller companies, and that doesn't have to be one-man bands or companies of 5 to 10 people, it can be up to, like 200 people, struggle to find marketers that are worth their soul. I remember, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. The marketing team at YouGov, most of them have been made redundant now. And that's a really interesting situation because if you're a marketer at YouGov, a lot of the time you were just plugging numbers into Marketo, or you were managing the delivery and production of like a white paper, but YouGov has enough people on its mailing list and it buys enough data that if it hits enough people enough of the time, its marketing effects work. Do you see what I mean? But it was never really about effectiveness. It was never really about long-term brand building. And I think, we saw that with them the year before last, where everything was sort of CEO driven. The CEO's got a different idea about what we should do for marketing. So the CMO comes down. So the marketers are all, there's like 20 of them, right? All told to stop what they're doing and go and do something else. And I think that consistency needs to come from right across the organization, and CMOs or heads of or marketing managers, depending on the size of the company, need to be having seats at the table when these discussions are happening and saying, no, this is the plan and we're sticking to it come hell or high water.
No, absolutely. There needs to be marketing at the head of the table, but
head of the table, that's a promotion.
There needs to be
just going to give them a seat
at the table. Yeah. We need
Who needs CEOs when you've got marketers?
We used to have a thing that we talked about a lot when I was at GASP, which was kind of, regaining marketing seat at the boardroom table. And I think it is essential. So, I mean, there's a number of reasons why we've lost a lot of that space. And I think a lot of it comes down to us.
Oh, some of it we deserve to lose, for sure. Yeah.
So, we've had... And again, I think digital has played a part, and that's not looking down on digital marketers at all. But it's meant that there are people that have been able to use digital tools to somehow create something effective for them, and suddenly they're an expert. Now that's just survivorship bias, and I'm pointing at you, Stephen Bartlett, and various others. You've got nothing you can teach me, son. You've done something yourself once, and well done, good luck to you. But you're just a grifter. He doesn't understand marketing. And you see a lot of stuff out there where if you were to put them in front of a serious business person, a CEO or a CFO, they'd have nothing because they're not going to buy into their charm. Well, some probably will, let's be honest. But you're selling snake oil, you're selling magic beans. You need to be able to talk business outcomes to business leaders. And when marketers don't do that, they don't deserve their space at the table. And we've lost a lot of that. Now, there are plenty of good marketers out there. Hi, Jesse. Thanks for the preach. Agree with you. And Jesse is one of them who can have a voice at the table. But increasingly, we've had self-taught marketers or even CEOs that fancy themselves as a marketer that have just taken away that role. And it's madness because when you look at it, kind of, I said this to someone yesterday, you can't actually have a business without making marketing decisions, whether or not you've got a marketer. Now, if you've got a trained marketer, you're going to be making better decisions and quicker. This whole thing of growth hacking where you throw everything at the wall and see which sticks. If you've got a trained marketer, you don't have to try everything to see what works. You're going to know broadly, not entirely. It's not a paint by numbers thing, but you're going to have a head start on just a pure growth hacker who doesn't know how marketing works.
And that trend marketer is going to say, buy some radio, buy some TV, buy some newspaper, and you're going to say, fuck you, get out of here. No one watches TV, listens to the radio, or reads newspapers anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there you go. My other favorite, Gary Vee. Nobody watches TV anymore. Fuck off, Gary Vee. Plenty of people watch TV, and actually, you've been ka-chinging it in the last couple of years, selling kind of Super Bowl ads. So shut your face. And while I'm at
it, NFTs,
he can get in the bin. And while I'm at who can get in the bin, Neil Patel, you can get in the bin too. Take Stephen Bartlett with you. Danny Murray, get in the bin. All of these people are full of shite. And unfortunately, what they're doing is they're influencing a lot of young, impressionable marketers that you can take shortcuts and you don't need an education. I mean, Neil Patel said you don't need to read books. Fuck off, Neil. Back there in this. So, marketing is important and brand is important. And that's the thing. When all you're doing is tactical, you don't understand actually what a brand is. So I'm going to ask you a question now.
Oh, God.
What is a brand? How would you define brand?
Man, I just wanted to talk about Neil Patel. That was where I came here. I thought we would get there.
He's definitely a brand.
I like him because he posted once on LinkedIn talking about how business cards were dead and that all you really need is something that has your name on it, has your website, and has your phone number. And I was like, so a business card, and he didn't respond, which I thought was rude of him. I thought it was really rude of him. I think it was, but yeah, I mean, to answer your question, what is brand? Why do I get the big existential questions? I mean, for me, it's like, if I'm thinking about a brand, and I'm looking around at my desk right now, and I've got all this sort of rant of the day. I thought Ben said point of the day, and I was like, I'll just opt out now. Leave John alone for the next 17 minutes. So much about brand is about like that memorability. It's about that feeling that you evoke in people. It's about, if someone thinks about your company or something, like how do they feel about your company? It's about what they remember about your company as well. It's about why they like or dislike your company. Both of those things are valid. And it's also about, funnily enough, sometimes brand is, I guess not funnily, but it is just about the product that you sell as much as it is about anything. And I think marketers often forget that. But a really good example of this is I was in the market recently for some liquid chalk, which you rub on your hands for like weightlifting and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I said to the guy at my gym,
drink when you go for an X-ray.
Yeah, I wish. I said to the guy at my gym, I was like, "Do you have any like recommendations for liquid chalk?" And he was like, "Yeah, anything under 10 quid because they're all the same." And I was like, "Great." So I go on Amazon, I buy one for 5 quid, right? The one I bought is Viper Vice. Now I've used it a few times. I like it. I now love that brand. I knew nothing about them except that they were cheap and they were in the price range that was quoted, but they do the job so effectively for me. They have a really nice packaging that I quite like. I will now probably stick with them forever because it's, that brand has proven that it works without any marketing sort of whatsoever. But again, I was in the market to buy, right? And I was buying just off price point. So I think like a lot of marketers as well, to talk a little bit about the 4 Ps, often do forget that price point is part of our job, and understanding that price and, product and placement is all part of our job as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. And what I would say to that as well is that, what brand gives us is brand equity. It means that we can charge more.
Yes.
So, there's a few good things.
Don't tell that to Viper Vice, John, because I don't want them to start charging more than a tenner.
I'm going to tell them that you are an influencer and they should be giving it to you free. But so, Neil's brought up that, Marty Neumeyer said a brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company, which I really like. And there's another one that I really like, which is, what's his name? The guy with, I think he's got like a bookshop or something. Jeff Bezos.
Stephen Bartlett.
No, he hasn't got a bookshop. He hasn't got anything. He's just got grift. Jeff Bezos, who kind of says a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And kind of, I've had a conversation with Paul Bailey from Halo, brilliant brand strategist. And over the years, we've been talking about this back and forth. He's got some great definitions. But for me, I like the angle that a brand is what separates a valuable product from a commodity. You don't
That's a much more
have
succinct way of putting it.
any equity without a brand. You're just a commodity. So if I'm in the market for fizzy brown sugar water, kind of doesn't really matter what it is if there's no brand. But if you look at Coca-Cola, going back to Coca-Cola again, because I don't like Pepsi personally, but there you go.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
We will talk about that as well. But going back to Coca-Cola, you will willingly pay more for a can of Coca-Cola than you would a home brand supermarket Coca-Cola, or a kind of one of the rip-off brands that look exactly like it. And that's the power of brand.
And you'll even swear black and blue that the Coca-Cola tastes different and better than the home brand one, even though they're the same.
Totally. No, absolutely. But going back to Pepsi, their campaign recently, was it you probs prefer Pepsi? And then with the tagline, 70% of people in blind taste tests prefer Pepsi. Well, but Coke outsells you 4-1, and it always has done. So,
but that's an interesting one, right? Because firstly, you run that ad in Scotland, and everyone's like, "Who gives a fuck? We drink Iron Brew." Yeah. Firstly, Scotland is the only territory in the world where Coca-Cola is not the number one selling soft drink. Yep. But the other thing that I think Pepsi have done well, and I like Pepsi, is that they own like the cinemas. And you go into a cinema and you want a drink, and it's Pepsi or it's Tango, and no one drinks fucking Tango, so you drink Pepsi. Now, I used to never be a Pepsi drinker, right? But you give a guy an unlimited card and you send him to the cinema 4 times a week, and there's only Pepsi to drink. All of a sudden, you that brand that washes off on you. Next thing I know, I'm in Tesco and I'm looking at the sugary brown liquids, and I'm like, I'm gonna get a Pepsi Max.
Well, that's that
instead
other P,
of a Coke Zero.
That's the other P. And if you look particularly at the soft drink giants, so Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper, who have kind of raced right to the top. So much of that is down to their partnerships. The quick service restaurant chains that they partner with, the cinema chains that they partner with, because each and every one of those, I can go to my local Chippy and have a choice of Coke or Pepsi from their little Rattly fridge, and Miranda. I don't even know where Miranda comes from, but it's kind of a wild looking thing.
They're good though.
Well, I don't know, diabetic now, but when you go to these big chains where so much is consumed, they're locked down. And I used to do a lot of work. When I was kind of head of the Europe office for a US agency, we did a lot of work with what we call QSRs, quick service restaurants, and just seeing how many of them there are there, how many chains there are in the US, regionally as well as nationally. And all of them will have a deal with one of the big soft drink suppliers. That's a huge route to market. And again, I think a lot of marketers don't consider, because we've not always had the opportunity to be part of the decision making. But that distribution, the placement, the partnerships, that can give you a real one up. And when you look at kind of D2C brands, where do they go?
And it's interesting too, because you talk about, you could go down to your local Chippy and make a different decision. You could choose between a Diet Coke and a Pepsi Max, and that might make you want to throw up in your mouth. But I would argue that for me at least, as a consumer, that decision's already made for me, because I've spent so much time with the Pepsi brand at the cinema, that I'm going to go to the fridge and I'm going to look at Coke and I'm going to think, oh, that's quite tantalizing, but I'm always going to reach for a Pepsi Max.
Right. So me and you go to the same chip shop at different times. I get my Diet Coke, you get your Pepsi Max. Fine. We go to the cinema together or separate. Maybe we have a romantic date at the cinema sometime.
Hopefully together, yeah.
Yeah. And we're stuck with the same thing. Probably 2 straws in one bowl.
Yeah. And I'm happy about that, because it's a brand that I'm familiar with. It's a brand that I'm comfortable with. It's a brand that I know I like. It's like the Starbucks effect, right? What makes Starbucks good is that it's consistent everywhere in the world. You know what you're getting.
That brings me to something that I've always been fascinated by. And I think it might have been Rory Sutherland talking about it. But if you talk about consistency, let's talk about McDonald's. Now, the fastest man in the world ever, wherever he went in the world, he would have chicken nuggets. 2 reasons. It gives him the protein he needs, and he knows it's not going to be shit. It's going to be what it is everywhere else. And people have a tendency to, they call it, was it satisfice? You know, you buy something that isn't shit. You very rarely spend time choosing the best option. You choose the easiest option, the one that takes least thought and that's least likely to be shit. So to the extent that many people, most of us probably, will go to a sandwich shop or a restaurant and have the same or the version of the same meal every time because we know it's going to tick the box for us, particularly if we're in a rush. If I go to Pret and I'm in a rush, I'm grabbing the same thing every single time. If I'm not in a rush, I might stand there and dawdle and go, oh, maybe I'll try this, maybe I can. But
and then you won't. You'll pick the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah,
but when was the last time you tried a new brand, though? Right? Because we like the things that we like as people. We know the things that are not shit.
Yeah.
Asking me to try a new brand is asking me to invest both money, time, and inconvenience in something I might not like. I mean, there's a good example, right? I shaved my head. I've found razors that I like, razor blades that I like. I'll now stick with those razor blades forever, because to buy a pack of razor blades that I don't like is both financially annoying and inconvenient because then I have to go out and buy more. There's no impetus to try.
Painful if they're not good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, totally. And that again is the power of brand. And if people don't know that your brand is an option for them, they're less likely to buy you. And that's where marketing is important. That's where brand is important to marketing. So if we talk about, you know, we were talking about the Tupperwares of the world earlier. What were they doing to actually relate themselves back to the category that's ended up being named after their product? Not enough, clearly. Because I've got loads of plastic tubs. I can tell you what, okay, some of them are takeaway cartons, probably a few too many of them, but I've got a whole load of plastic tubs. Not one of them a Tupperware brand. I can't remember the last time I bought a Hoover from Hoover. And yeah, my sellotape is all home brand WH Smiths.
Oh, fancy boy. Someone goes to the airports for his sellotape.
Hey, I mean, I'm in Loughton. We've only got 4 shops here, and one of them is WH Smiths.
Pop down to Gatwick for some sellotape.
You know me, always looking for fun. But so kind of so one of the other questions that someone asked was about different types of brand. So Sonic branding in particular. What are your thoughts on Sonic branding?
Consistency is key. Is probably that. I think finding a unique Sonic brand is probably very, very hard for most people. Whether or not you should do it.
Dong.
Yeah, exactly.
Rubbish. But you know what it is.
Yeah. But there's so many Sonic brands, you know. And I think it's like if you have a Sonic brand, then you need to be invested in making it work for you. So you should be advertising on podcasts, advertising on radio, using it in your TV, all of that sort of stuff, using it in your YouTube ads, and making sure that you're consistent across the board. I think it's I remember Gary Vee talking about how Sonic brands were going to be the future, and he was like one of the first people to have one, in air quotes. He wasn't, because radio, but he thought he was, and he was sort of, and all his videos had this annoying noise at the start of them. I think people can get swept up in that, and we should have Sonic brands, but unless you're actually going to use them, they're kind of a waste of time. Think about how they actually fit into your marketing mix, and think about, where you're actually spending that money. It's the same with mascots, right? Mascots make people buy. People love mascots, but there's no point having a mascot and then never using it. You have, like we said at a million times, you have to be consistent with all of your brand assets. So make sure it works for you first. I think Sonic brands are cool if but I don't even think Spotify has a Sonic brand. It's just the noise of the email coming into my inbox saying your payment's been declined. You'll be moved on to our free plan soon.
I mean, I think you're right. It's about the usage. And Jenny Rumniak's distinctive assets grid, where it's kind of, there's a use it or lose it. And I think there's too many people that don't use it. Now, again, I'm going to go back to Coke. They do. I think Netflix's Da-Dum is really good. I mean, they even have Da-Dum Fest every year. The most bland thing ever is Intel, but it's still memorable. So, all of these things can be clear. And actually, that one that I really like is the Crunch on a Magnum, which they've been using as a Sonic device over the years. So all of these things are super powerful if they're used, like with any other asset. you've got to use them. Otherwise, they're not going to mean anything to anybody. And turning up with a different one every couple of weeks is bullwhack, really. Kind of how long have Coke been going with a version of do 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 do?
Yeah,
that's the other one. That's McDonald's, isn't it?
Yeah,
McDonald's.
Yeah, that's McDonald's. Yeah.
Sorry, I meant always Coca-Cola. Do, 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 do. They've been going with that for ages. McDonald's with You Loving It has been going on for quite a while, but actually, that wasn't introduced that long ago, really. But they've run it through for probably well over a decade since, and it's memorable.
And they've got the media planning behind it too, right? And I think this is the thing: is like there are so many options for people to choose for distinctive assets and different kinds of branding that they need to not get too excited and try to do all of them, especially if they're a small team, and just do the ones that they can do really well.
I think media plan is a really good point to bring up as well, because we can talk about organic social, we can talk about using assets, but actually we need to be putting them where people are going to see them and hear them and experience them, and that is about media spend, certainly about media planning. So even if you are doing organic, who is it reaching? How many people is it reaching? Is it reaching enough? Is it actually going to make a difference? And don't forget, you've also got the whole thing of kind of what they call it, kind of costly signaling, where people connect to things that they know other people are connected to. So we might all have a different version of a one-to-one. Let's say, for example, let's say there's someone out there that's trying to sell us personalized one-to-one lead generational emails. Okay, now that could be a thing, but it's not going to build a brand, because we all need to see, hear, and experience the same thing. I'm never going to buy a Bugatti. No, I'm never going to have the money to buy a Bugatti, let alone anything else. I'm never going to buy a Bugatti, but I know what Bugatti means. So I know that when I see one, that it projects what that person wants to be. And it's important. And I think that's where the media plan comes into play. We might all see just one thing, but we need to know that other people are seeing it. And you can do this on the down low. I think you can do it with minimal budget. And if I look at what Joe Wellstead's doing with Ocean, particularly with influencers, I think he's doing it really well. It's getting out there. We're all seeing Ocean regularly. And I'm surprised by the number of people that have just got obsessed by it through seeing other people in their network getting onto it, which is a great low-level thing of doing it. But he's someone that understands brand. He understands marketing, despite not being a marketer. And so it can be done, but it's not easy. And if you've got the money, spend some money.
And also, plan is like the most important part of that. Plan your fucking media spend. If you're doing direct mail, plan it so that your local newspaper has an ad in it at the same time that your direct mail is landing. Don't do your direct mail and then a month later run your newspaper ads. Do both is what I'm trying to say, is that you can't just, I think a lot of the problems that people have when it comes to building a brand is that everything's a scattergun approach. No one wants to commit to anything long enough for it to produce any kind of dividend. So your Bugatti point's funny, actually, because I know nothing about cars, but I want to buy a Mini. And I want to buy a Mini mostly because of the Italian job, and also because of what they say, because of their brand, of what it says about someone that drives a Mini. And I see Minis around and I go, yeah, Minis look cool. They look cooler than a Skoda S56 ZW. And I think they look cooler than, and Tesla's owned by, a DEC. So that sort of rules them out of the electric car market for me. His personal brand's certainly overtaking his company brand. But yeah, for me, it's like if you were to say, what's your dream car? I would say like a Mini Cooper. And I know nothing about cars. There's probably a better, more expensive car out there, but I just don't know what it is.
So with the side that one of my best mates drives a Mini, I've always described, or not always, but recently described them as silly little cars for silly little people. And part of the reason
I'm all of those things.
Huh?
I am a silly little man.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I don't know, and I don't know whether or not my opinion has changed since they're every time. So around here, we've got a BMW dealership that's also a Mini dealership. So it's basically a twat factory. And I see a lot of boy racery twats around here in Minis, kind of cutting me up, not knowing how to drive. But anywho, I think by the looks of it, we're on our own now, but we're also at time. So thanks everyone for listening. If you're still here watching, Seb, thanks for the chat. It's been good fun. We've managed to keep it cleaner than we normally do.
Yeah, I'm very proud of both of us.
Let's do a filthy jokes one sometime soon.
Let's go. I got a whole lot of them lined up.
Brilliant. Cheers, mate.
See you
Take
soon.
care.
Bye.
Bye.